All right, y'all, we are back at Intellectual Extremists. Now, check this out. For those of you who are just now joining us, we appreciate you for taking out your time, whether if you're white or black, if you are of the religious faith, if you are a part of the conscious community, if you are someone who is simply political and you just want to hear what this brother is talking about, or if you are an agent trying to gather data, information, or intel, welcome. Welcome all. Welcome all. We appreciate you for being here. This is part 2 of an episode where we were breaking down the field of mental health. And this came about because there has been a rise in issues, or should I say, there has been a publicizing of issues that have been going on for years when it comes to our people and others as it pertains to suicidality, as it pertains to homicide, as it pertains to all these different issues, the overwhelming amount of trauma, the overwhelming amount of unresolved issues that are happening in our families, in our communities, with our colleagues, with our friends who we work with, you name it. There are issues that we have to face. And my main thing is, if you have problems that are going on, if you feel like, the world is against you, or you're just stressed out, you don't know who to talk to, whatever it is that's going on, man, life got you down, your job ain't treating you well, your husband ain't treating you right, your wife ain't treating you right, you two should communicate. But if that doesn't work, get therapy. What do I mean by therapy? I am not endorsing the drugging of anyone. Drugs, I do not feel, are the appropriate solution. Do they cure anything? No, they do not. And we're going to delve into that. So if you are a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, anyone in the field of mental health, I just want you to know, I'm delving into the history of this before any of you were born. That's what I'm delving into. Because in order for us to understand these areas and these fields that we are involved in, the areas that we are now becoming professionals in, we must know the history of it. We must understand the foundation of it. What is it that is a part of the blood of this thing? What is it that is a part of the culture? How was it established? In what type of climate? What was the environment like? What was happening at that time? Who was the dominant individual or group that was in control of it? What was their motive? What was the goal? And what, pray tell, were the solutions and the outcomes? This is why we're going into this. So part 1, we went over some of the history when it comes to insane asylums. We went into eugenics. We went into some overall understandings as to why they say normally crazy old white men, normally, all right, when it comes to the field of mental health, normally crazy old white men who were trying to convince the world that everyone else was crazy except for them. Interesting. This section, we're going to delve into, I would say, somewhat more of the movie type of settings, somewhat, things that we've only seen in cinema, where we thought it was just a movie, not realizing that many of these movies are based off of these things that people were doing in real life in history. So let us go ahead and delve right into this part here. Before I say that, again, seek therapy, not drugs. Seek therapy, not drugs. Don't cover up the problem, address the problem. Go into your family history, learn about yourself. Look at the unresolved issues that you may have when it comes to fatherly love, motherly love, or the lack thereof, either or. Look at what's happening and then look at different solutions and methods to resolve these problems so that the stress can come up off you. You can live a better and healthier life. You don't feel like taking yourself out, taking others out. Don't let life get you down. Seek out people who you can trust, who you can talk to, and that way we can move forward in life, but not the drugs. Now, let's continue. I'm going to mention something here. There is something that people may not know about, but a lot of us were introduced to it with movies. For example, the movie Saw. I just say, y'all know the Saw saga. Saw 1, Saw 2, Saw 3, Jigsaw. I want to play a game. Crazy old white man. Same situation. Okay? It was in a movie. Or was it? Point is, there's a man by the name of Manfred Sackel. Manfred Sackel was an individual here who used something he called insulin therapy, coma therapy. Manfred Sacco believed that there were good brain cells and that there were bad brain cells. Okay, I want us to be very mindful again. A lot of these areas and fields of science were founded or taken over usually when certain Caucasian men took it over. They were insane. Just call it like it. They were crazy as hell white men who were trying to make insanity look like sanity, making craziness look like it was intelligence, making illogical nonsense look like logical sense. Just put this in your mind before we move any forward. Just any move forward at any rate. Because I'm going to mention some things and you're going to be like, Rizza, that's not true. It's a movie. You watch that movie. No, you're going to have to delve into some history with me here. Manfred Sacco used something called insulin therapy. He believed there were good brain cells and bad brain cells. He believed that you could kill just the bad brain cells and it would keep the good brain cells intact. And he used insulin in high dosages to initiate, to cause, to trigger convulsions and seizures in the body. And he believed that if you survive this epileptic seizure, that the bad brain cells are now gone and you have nothing but good brain cells left. That is science, children. That's what they call science. Okay, not too bad, huh? Let's go ahead and look at the fact that all over America, insulin shock wards took over for quite some time. They actually were pushing this in hospitals all throughout America and other parts of the world. Insulin shock wards. Please make sure you are looking at every single fact. And if you don't believe anything I'm saying, pause the video here, go look it up and leave it up here so you can have my face looking at you while it's paused. Yeah, you found out. Okay, now, coma therapy. Damn it. Coma therapy. 2 words again. Coma therapy. I'm all for getting good rest, but not in that way. They believed that they shocked people enough with insulin that 1, it would drive out bad brain cells. Number 2, if they slept well enough and they got through it with no more epilepsy, that they no longer had bad brain cells, they just had good brain cells, and this was a breakthrough procedure. They always, every 40 to 50 years, came up with some crazy so-called solution. They called it a breakthrough in science. This method doesn't work anymore. It was horrible. We don't really want to admit it. We kind of damaged a whole lot of people, but hey, we got a new method now. This method works. Don't worry about that in the past. It was just trial and error. Forget it. Let's move on. You have something called coma therapy. A man by the name of Dr. Ladislaus von Meduna. This is very interesting. He used a drug called metrazole to induce seizures and epilepsy. He believed that through using metrazole that he could drive out schizophrenia. Think about it. Think about it 1 second here. He believed he can use a drug called metrazole to drive out schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia, of course, where people believe you have multiple personalities. The average person walking planet Earth right now, everybody, according to the field of psychiatry, according to the field of mental health, there is not one human being walking the planet Earth who is sane. And I'm not saying you as a psychiatrist, you as a therapist, you as a psychologist are saying this. I'm saying the field that you have been studying in or practicing in for years, or if you're new to the area of study, the history, the foundation, the people who are the founding fathers of this thing, so to speak, not from the original understanding of how the mind works, but how they took it over and made it seem as though they invented it. They were saying this. The culture that is underneath it is what has been saying it, and they're quite wrong. But please make sure you know the history of the field, because this man by the name of, again, Dr. Ladislaus von Meduna, using metrazole, this went all throughout the United States and all throughout the world as well, believing that schizophrenia, having multiple personalities, can be driven out of the body. Remember, a personality is not physical. This is another reason why it's kind of sad. They go off of chemicals in the body and try to equate that with emotions. Emotionalism is not a physical. We do get that, right? emotionalism and emotions and personality is not physical. Then you can go into the brain. You can say, well, Rizza, there are chemical connections within the brain that help to add to or remove from personality traits. No doubt at all. But chemistry is a physical thing. Thoughts and ideas are not. And so therefore, with a person having different personalities, if they do not have a physical deformity of the brain, how can you justify multiple personalities when, to be very honest, nobody on planet Earth is just one mental person? Meaning, I can give different perspectives. Giving a different perspective means you're going into a different frame of thinking to look at things in a different way. So therefore, it's not that we have multiple personalities. We'll just have multiple ways of looking at things. But still, that will be considered schizophrenia by some parts of the definition. So I don't want to digress too far into that, but I wanted us to look at the fact that they believe that you could drive this out by chemically shocking a person with a drug called metrazole. So making a person have epilepsy, making a person have seizures will drive this out because this is a mental illness, is what they said. Okay, let's continue. Interestingly enough, they said a person who has schizophrenia, a seizure or epilepsy, and schizophrenia cannot exist within the same brain. So if we're seeing a person's body shaking, that means there's no more schizophrenia. I know this sounds crazy because it is. And this is the actual history of how they taught. Moving forward from Dr. Ladislaus von Meduna, interestingly enough, they would normally around 40 to 45 patients could be shocked every morning by one single psychiatrist using the drug metrazole. These are the numbers that they would normally have. By the year 1939, metrazole was used in over 70% of hospitals in America. And it took storm all throughout the world and other countries. They made lots of money by doing this because, be mindful, sitting with a person in therapy, being a psychologist or a therapist, really sitting and talking with a person, like getting to know the person, actually learning about the history, asking them questions about their childhood, how they were raised, what are some traumatic circumstances that they experienced, that caused them to be where they are right now. An actual person who cares about who you are, where your mind is, so that they can address the cause, which will lead to the effect in its existence, and therefore it will resolve because you address the cause of the problem. That takes more time, right? That takes more than 15, 20 minutes. That normally can take 30 minutes to an hour. Well, when you're doing that, you have to bill insurance companies normally, or if that person pays out of pocket, you can only charge so much for that. But if you could sit down with the person for 15 minutes, hear them talk a little bit, and then give them a label, and then boom, charge them or their insurance, you can bring more people in a shorter amount of time and make a lot more money. Now, this is how they set this up. I'm not saying this is any of you, but this is how they set this system up. Let's continue. You now have something called ECT, right? ECT. For those of you who may not know, that is known as electroconvulsive therapy. It's a very nice way of saying electroshock. That's the original name for it. So let's go back. ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, is not a therapy per se, but it is a more modernized way of saying we're going to put electricity, like you see in this brain behind me. We're going to send electricity through your skull into your brain and throughout your body to clean up your mental problem. I want us to pause there for a second. Every scary movie that you've ever seen, any movies dealing with mental problems, any movies dealing with insane asylums, House on Haunted Hill, Shutter Island, different things like that where people are locked up in insane asylums or mental health facilities or mental treatment facilities. This is how this stuff originated. So now you see ECT or electroshock comes into the picture, but where did that start? Because now this is a new breakthrough procedure, right? 1938, in Rome, Italy, you had two Italian psychiatrists who were looking at these men in slaughterhouses who were slaughtering pigs. And before they slaughtered the pigs, pigs running around, you can't really catch them, especially if they're wet, they got mud on them. But you're trying to slaughter them, y'all, at the slaughterhouses, those who eat pork, you're trying to slaughter them, but it's kind of hard to catch them. So they found a way to make it manageable. So they would put these two metal beams, long metal bars, and they would clamp it on the side of the pig's head and shock them with electricity to where the pig would fall over and just lie down and be much more manageable so that they could slaughter them easier. They wouldn't be fighting back. They wouldn't be jumping around. They'd just be lying there because you just shocked them into a vegetative state. This is where ECT, or electroshock, came from. It was a technique used to make pigs easily able to be slaughtered. Hold that thought. You had in 1848, let's go back even further, a man by the name of Phineas Gage, who was a railway worker. A steel beam, due to an explosion, was blown through his skull. Although he survived, it rapidly changed his personality. Well, of course, if you have a big piece of steel going through your head, I'm sure that would change your personality. At least you get pissed off for a minute. You might get out of character, to say the least. But he had his entire personality shifted because the steel beam went through his skull and all the way through his brain. So he survived, and that was a case that was studied by Rizza Islam. Now, this man here, 70 years later, mind you, who said, that's a very interesting situation with this man named Phineas Gage. He survived, but his personality was changed. Maybe I can do the same thing, but I don't need to shove a damn metal beam through a person's head to accomplish said personality shift or change. I'll just do it chemically. Here we go again. So what did Mr. Rizza Islam do? Mr. Rizza Islam said, let's just start drilling into the skull of a human being. Open up their head real quick one time. And after we drill into their head, I'm going to spray or squirt alcohol directly into the brain of this person until I feel that I've cleared up enough tissue and that will change their personality. What did Mr. Rizza Islam call this? A lobotomy. You getting it now? Again, be mindful. These are breakthrough procedures. This is science, people. Trust the science. This is science. So I'm going to drill into your head, and I'm going to pour alcohol into your brain to change your personality, because this is a breakthrough in the field of mental health. We are helping to cure people of mental disease and mental illness. Remember, they keep using the term mental illness. Illness denotes some type of bacteria, some type of virus, something that's causing or creating a reaction within the body. It's not mental illness. It may be a mental problem, maybe mental trauma. Sure, all of that is legit. But once they started to use the term illness, it's because they wanted to legitimize themselves into real scientists. And I'm not saying, again, for those of you who are psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, this is the history of this field. And be mindful, again, that Mr. Rizza Islam, once he started to practice this thing called the lobotomy, it got real bad. Now, we're talking about the mid-1940s now. Who is it that carried this legacy on and evolved it even further into some of the most horrific brain hacking procedures? A man by the name of Walter J. Freeman. Walter J. Freeman. I want you to please remember this name. Walter J. Freeman. This crazy white man. And if you're white watching, you know what I'm talking about. This dude, he came out of nowhere and said, you know what? I don't want to blow a steel beam through a person. Said, no, I don't even want to put chemicals into the person's brain by drilling into it. That's too much of a mess. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bypass all that. I'm just going to take nothing more than an ice pick, stick it right up into the orbital bone, right behind the top of your eye. Stick it right up to the top of the frontal lobe, and I'm going to scrape it back and forth until I feel like I've damaged enough tissue to clean up a person's mental illness. That's another breakthrough procedure in science. Science! Trust the science.
One of our main goals when running a business is exposure. We need potential clients to see our product, But how? That's when teamwork is necessary. And that's why Intellectual Extremists offers support to provide exposure. Intellectual Extremist platform has inclined in views because of the great informative content. We are more than happy in sharing those views by providing a 30-second segment with our videos to give your product exposure. Come join our team at promo@intellectualones.org.
Walter J. Freeman, this man, with his so-called new breakthrough procedure, traveled the damn country in something he called the lobotomobile. All right, you know what? See, all right, I'm going to pause here. I'm just going to pause and look at the big black brain for a second. Make sure I'm not going crazy. Okay, listen. Okay, when you study these things, and you start to realize the foundation and the history of how sick the minds of people were to establish this and how they literally played God with your brain and your entire body to try to say this is what causes this person to be crazy. This is what causes them to be deranged. This is what causes them to be defiant. Remember, they said black people had a mental disease because they wanted to run away from slavery. We covered this in the first part of this episode series. They said we had drapetomania, Samuel Cartwright. Black people are crazy because they want to run away from slavery. Remember, they said that black people had a disease called nigritude, Benjamin Rush, which caused our skin to be dark. He also said that, well, insanity comes from having too much blood on the brain. Wow, these are geniuses. I can't believe it. Insanity because I have too much blood on the brain. How much is too much? How much is too little? I don't know, just bleed the person to 50% of the blood in their body. That's what Mr. Benjamin Rush would do. And his breakthrough technique, he would call bloodletting. He also was known as the master bleeder. He was one of those people who helped to inspire the segregation movement because he believed that black people were diseased and therefore cannot be around white folks because we would cause people to get sick. So therefore, colored only here. Don't drink water with them. It's pathology. Oh my God, you'll get sick. Don't eat with them. Don't go to the restroom with them. You damn sure don't want to have sex or have children with them. Make sense now? So they reduced it to pathology, a pathological circumstance. This is so-called science. This is why it's very difficult for us to listen to these institutions because your foundation is insane. So let's continue. You have Mr. Walter J. Freeman and his lobotomobile. This man traveled the country and he would get referrals from doctors, local doctors and physicians to literally lie a person on a table like this, get a tool that was like an ice pick and put it into the person's orbital bone right behind the eye socket, go all the way up and just scrape back and forth. Again, no anesthesia. Many times, no anesthesia. I'm gonna say this again. It kind of brings you back to J. Marion Sims, I believe, the so-called father of gynecology who used to test his methods on black women, right? Science. Well, they can take it. They have, they don't have much of a pain receptor, so they can take it. They can take a lot of pain. He would do this up until the point where the last patient he had died on the table. Go figure. Between the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And you know what? Let me pause that. He supervised over 3,500 of these procedures. He either conducted the majority or supervised some. And all of this happened, and he even admitted that at least 25% of all of his patients were left in a vegetative state. Of course, you're causing a person to be a vegetable by scraping parts of their brain. And then roughly after this, 40s go by, 50s go by, 60s go by. Then they came out and admitted, the American Psychiatric Association admitted that this was a damaging procedure. Okay, fine. All right, so we're going to toss that in the trash now, right? So the other method didn't work. Toss that in the trash. Psychosurgery doesn't work. Toss that in the trash. You know what? Don't worry about all those millions of people we've damaged for their lives permanently damaged. Let's just move forward. Let's move on to the next method and see if this works. They were running trials on people. This is all they've done. Trial and error, and they call it science. Okay, let's continue. By the way, I'm going to have to do a part 3 because it gets deeper than this. It's like, Rizza, how can this get deeper? I know. Let's continue. So we're looking at this point here. After you look at Mr. Walter J. Freeman, can y'all guess what we're going to point out next? Can you guess what we're going to point out next? You do know not only did they admit that it was a damaging treatment, they then turned around and still supported the treatment, saying, but still it was a breakthrough in science. It's kind of like with the shots, people take shots. Oh, we killed 1 million, but hey, we saved a couple 100,000. It's a sick lack of accountability, because if they take accountability, then that means they can be sued. And if they can be sued, then that means there's a lot of people who can sue, and therefore they more than likely will go bankrupt. Pharmaceutical companies are very slick with this. But let's go ahead and move on to the next point. So after this whole lobotomy circumstance kind of put another stain on the already dirtied image of psychiatry in the field of mental health, they kind of reversed and brought electroshock back into the picture. Now think about this. It comes back with anesthesia, because many times back then the old way of practicing electroshock was without anesthesia. They would shock this person, and I'm talking between 50 and up to 400 volts of electricity going through a person's head. Now, what level of electricity are we dealing with here? This is the kind of electricity you see with commercial-sized printing presses, steel mills, large machinery. That's the kind of electricity that is required for these machines, and that's the kind of electricity, the level, the voltage, the high amount that is going through a person's brain. So when they would shock these people, they did not have anesthesia, and once that happened, these people's bodies, spines would break, teeth would come right out, because it's snapping a person's body. And if you look at old black and white footage of these mental hospitals, how they were doing this to people, it's like, how could you do such a thing? And they would justify it all in the name of science. So they bring it back now. They're using anesthesia, which means a person's body is not shaking like it would before, because the muscles are relaxed. It doesn't look as bad, and so therefore it gives the image that it's progressed now. It's evolved. It's better. They've gotten out the kinks. You know what I'm saying? It's all good now. No, it just looks better. It's a cosmetic thing. It just looks good. It's like the term where they say putting lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig. It's still ugly. It's full of worms. It is not good for you. It's still a damn pig. So they bring it back. Not only does it produce that much wattage, but think about this. 2/3 of those who receive electroshock, but they call it ECT, are women. Reason why do they give it to women more than anybody else? Well, let's see here. They say you have any one of these things normally when you go and get your electroshock normally. Premenstrual syndrome, postpartum depression, menopausal disorder. So you qualify, and there are other so-called labels. These different labels qualify you to be given electroshock as an option, or what they call, again, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. Again, it sounds nice. It's electricity being pushed through your brain. No logical reason to do such a thing at all. There is no science in this at all. As a matter of fact, on PubMed, they even admit that this causes more problems with your menstrual cycle. So now they admit it. But back then, hey, it's all good. Tell that woman to shut up. Here, put some electricity through her brain. Shut her up. It's just old crazy white men now who did not care for their own women, let alone black women, brown women, anybody else in between. So it was a way to hush these people up. And then, of course, it was used all over the place for everybody else. But the other side of this is roughly 50% out of those who are given electroshock, or what they call ECT, are elders. Why elders, Rizza? You mean the elders who they already have these different issues? They already have Alzheimer's. Their brains are already not working as well as they used to. They can't walk as good. Health problems. They're getting into old age. Why would they put electricity through their brain? Let me mention this to you. They say they have all these different disorders and mental problems, right? Our elders. This is why you have to be very careful about sending your elders to these homes and these institutions. Once they get up to the age where they qualify for government insurance, the majority of those who are given electroshock increases by the number of those who qualify for the government insurance. So therefore, once they qualify for that, they are complete. I'm talking about suggested quickly. You know what? They should do some ECT. That'll help them. Some ECT will help them because now the insurance pays for that. And the money is major. Again, this is not science, but it was based in the total insanity and really torture of human beings. And now it comes out as science.
Are you a thinker, an intellectual, or are you an intellectual extremist? In these critical times we are living in today, a time we never imagined could ever exist, is our reality. How we maneuver in this dark drama we wish was a movie is crucial in order to live a life of peace, happiness, and integrity. The most important thing we need to remember is that we are not alone, and that's why intellectual extremists exist today. We all have different roles and responsibilities we can take part in, but what is essential within roles is having the equipment to stay fortified, shielded, and also to help others. By joining our Patreon, a way you can support and be rewarded for furthering the mission to provide survival skills both for intellectual, physical, and spiritual prosperity. We have 3 tiers on Patreon you can choose from. Join our Patreon and experience the wonderful exchange of giving and receiving. Let's light others' light with our light, something that is truly needed in these dark times. Join Intellectual Extremist Patreon today.
And because of this circumstance called ECT, they rake in over $1.2 billion a year. They even give pregnant women this procedure. Yeah. You see how you're boiling right now? If you haven't already gotten pissed off or if you're not in sheer disbelief. Yeah. It's a very sick thing that we're dealing with, and because it's become normalized, people think, oh, it's just science, oh, it's just regular. No, you've been programmed heavily. That's why you see in virtually every one of the damn scary movies that you watch, some form of psychotropic drug is mentioned. Always. Right now, after you finish watching this, when you start watching movies, you're going to notice the psychiatric label come out. Somebody's going to mention, oh, I'm dyslexic, blah, blah, blah. You're going to see the orange pill bottle. You're going to start seeing them say, oh, in order for me to survive, I have to take this pill, psychotropic drug. All these scary movies, they do it, especially Freddy Krueger movies. The only way that he could stay awake or stay alive is if he took this psychotropic drug. So what does that communicate to you psychologically, watching it through the screen? In order to stay alive, I have to take that drug. It's what they do. It's what they do. It's a very wicked way of programming. So people walking around thinking, hey man, it's normal. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't got no degree. You're not a psychologist. Do you know the majority of people who are some of the craziest on the planet happen to be the people who specialize in how the mind works? You know how many psychiatrists have been convicted of rape and molestation? You know how many psychiatrists have been convicted of fraud, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, organ trafficking? You know how many psychiatrists have been convicted of this nonsense, of torture? The list is insane. Child pornography, it's crazy. And these are the people who we have to trust with our minds. I just want to help us to get this understanding when we discuss the field of mental health so that we can understand what the history is, the foundation of this thing. That way you can thoroughly understand it better and get back to actually communicating with each other and working on our health and our nutrition and looking at what goes on in our families and really address problems and causes, not reactions. We are almost done. We are almost done. Here's the part where it gets very interesting. Well, Rizza, what about the drugs? I'm on this drug, I'm on that drug. Well, I'm not going to tell you to take or not take. I definitely will encourage you, of course, up front, to not necessarily take drugs, because that's not going to solve the problem. If you're on them, get with the nutritionist, get with your counselor, get with your doctor, and find a way to replace it with proper nutrition. Vitamins, minerals, exercise, etc., talk therapy, water therapy, tons of different other solutions that you can utilize, which actually will help you. But the drugs are not the solution. Rizza, prove that. Why should we even listen to this part? In the 1950s, they came out with something that they referred to as the chemical lobotomy. Chemical lobotomy. So after Igaz Moniz drills into your brain, and after Walter J. Freeman starts scraping up the tissue of the frontal lobe, and after they go through all these processes of finding out that, maybe that doesn't work best, they came out with a chemical way of doing it, and this drug, because the drugs became their top money-making solution to science and mental problems. The drug is called Thorazine. Y'all see it right here on the screen. Thorazine. It became their magic bullet. Boy, this right here is where you kind of start getting irritated, because they said this is just like psychosurgery. I'm going to quote Heinz Lehman, a Canadian psychiatrist. He said it's a chemical lobotomy, just like psychosurgery without the mess. Does the same thing. You just don't see how bad the damage really is, but it does the same thing. Half the time, real quick, take a pill, does the same thing to the frontal lobe, damaging the brain. Hey, science. Let's continue. That was in 1948. I'm going to quote someone here. Dr. Winfred Overholzer, the former president of the American Psychiatric Association between 1947 and 1948, said, quote, he said, the new tranquilizing drugs are ushering in a new era in our progress in the field of mental health. End quote. New tranquilizing drugs are ushering in a new era, because everything they did before was crazy as hell. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of energy. It was disgusting. It was blatant. People saw the damage. It made no sense. It didn't work. Now they found a way to be covertly evil and damaging by using drugs and chemistry in a way where it looked like there was more progress. And interestingly enough, when I looked at this, the drug Thorazine, if anyone knows about Thorazine, if any of you have elders, because they mainly targeted our elders when it came to the drug Thorazine, there is a effect, not side effect, but a direct effect called tardive dyskinesia, where you have the muscle movements, uncontrollable muscle movements. A lot of us know people on the street, people we grew up with, people we saw, our elders, who have these uncontrollable muscle movements. They're not just from those who did PCP or crack or heroin, any of these other kind of drugs that we knew that those were drugs that were doing bad, boom, boom, boom. But a drug that is legal, that was offered and suggested, and that psychiatrists were putting people on, prescribing people. Thorazine was causing this issue. That's brain damage. Sometimes it would last for a long period of time, or it would become permanent. The producer of Thorazine, SmithKline French, do you know that they made a 500% return on their initial investment, making upwards of over $647 million? Damn. That was a good investment. Not like FTX and that Bitcoin situation with that scandal and Enron, but I digress. That was a large investment, and they made a large return on the investment, making a lot of money off of a brain damaging chemical that they called a breakthrough or a magic bullet in science. The 1970s, by the way, roughly 20 years later, they would then come out and admit that these side effects were real. Tardive dyskinesia is directly connected to Thorazine and that it is a problem. Again, they come out with the so-called breakthrough. It damages a lot of people, potentially kills a lot of people. They act like it never happened. They said it's just a part of the process, or that was a side effect of what the person was already doing outside of our care. And a couple years go by, maybe a decade or two, and they say, you know what? It was our fault. It was what we were doing. But we're not really worried about that. We're going to go into another breakthrough. We just found out here's another breakthrough, guys. Come on. Let's go look at this one. And I'm almost done with this part because it's just too much. I'm going to have to do a part 3 on this. I know, y'all. I know. I feel bad too. You know what? You can actually support us right here. Go ahead and give us some support because this is a lot of research that we're doing. Go ahead, send in that right there for support. Also, if you would like to become a member so that you can see these episodes at least 2 days earlier, 48 hours before anyone else, go to joinfreethinkers.com. Become a member. A lot of perks, a lot of things you get with that. Joinfreethinkers.com. Make sure you join that and subscribe to RizzaIslam.com. Let's continue. In 1967, think about this. We hear about secret meetings happening all the time. Different circumstances with banking or, when it comes to them trying to control the minds of the people, or scientific circumstances, or Bill Gates and, and the Sith and him joining up with Lord Voldemort and all the other evildoers and Klaus Schwab and all of these crazy folks. We hear about all these meetings. Well, this meeting took place in 1967 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where psychiatrists met up in Puerto Rico to usher in this new craze, this new trend of, hey, drugs, man. Like, wait a minute, we never thought about this. We could use drugs instead of surgery, drugs instead of actual therapy, drugs instead of talking to people, drugs instead of actually addressing trauma and causes and negative situations going on in different neighborhoods. We can just use drugs. We need to meet and discuss this because this can be very lucrative. And after what they saw with Thorazine, they for damn sure said this is definitely going to be lucrative. We can give people drugs all over the place. No liability, lots of money. Oh, come on. So some of the psychiatrists who met up were Joseph Zubin, Ashley Montagli, that's a male, Nathan Klein, remember his name, Oscar Resnick, Wayne Evans, Heinz Lehman, and others. I'm going to quote one Nathan Klein here. And these were his final thoughts at the end of that meeting in Puerto Rico in 1967. Quote, "The present breadth, money, wealth, of drug use may be almost trivial when comparing it to the possible number of chemical substances that will be available for the control of selective aspects of man's life in the year 2000. End quote. What did he just say? He like, the amount of money we making right now ain't nothing compared to what we about to get into. We about to go get the bag. Y'all hear me? We thought we was getting something with this. Yo, the drug game is where it's at. The drug game is where, we need to go get after this, and quickly, because we can make a lot of money in a short period of time with low minimal effort at all, and we'll be able to get off scot-free because all we need to say is that the person is crazy. The number one field that I would say has the most corruption with the least amount of real oversight to check is the field of psychiatry and mental health. Why? Because you can blame your client for everything, including what you do to them. You just have to say they're crazy. It's their mental illness. It's their mental problem. That's why they did that. That's why they have burns on their arms. That's why they're saying I forced myself on them when she was in my office. I didn't do anything to her. It's as a result of her mental illness. She's just crazy. That's why a lot of women can't stand when men just call them crazy when they legit is calling out your crap, or vice versa. When the man is legitimately calling out the woman's crap, the woman's calling out the man's crap, and you just go to, you're just crazy, because it's what psychiatrists did. It came from the culture of the field of mental health. Just calling a person crazy will relieve you of all responsibility. You can sit back and the world will just look at them like they are the problem, even when they never were. Just wanted to bring this out so that everyone can look at the fact that the field of mental health, and I'm going to do a part 3 because I have to go into the drug side of this. I have to go into the amount of money, how many drugs, how many people are on these drugs on average. Do you know that over half of Americans are on one or more forms of psychotropic drugs? The common side effects of these drugs, of which are headaches, foggy memories, suicidal thoughts, homicidal tendencies, increases of depression. These are common effects of these drugs. Drugs like Wellbutrin. Do you know that there are over 100 million people in America that are on one or more forms of psychotropic drugs? Drugs like Adderall, Wellbutrin, Valium, Zyprexa, Zymbalta, you name it. Some of you may be on one or more of what I already just mentioned. You're like, damn, you calling me out. Doesn't mean you're crazy. Doesn't mean you are deranged. No, people got issues. Let's not get this twisted. People have issues. But we have to resolve our issues in a way where we're not clouding the problem, covering it up with a Band-Aid, but we're actually addressing the root, the cause of it, and not benefiting a system that genuinely does not want us to get better. And I'm not saying every person that works within it. No, the system itself, because I guarantee most psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists do not know the history of the field that they are in. Most. Some do, but most do not. I'm going to mention a notable psychiatrist who did know her field. And this is our sister, the late, great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Make sure you get this book, The ISIS Papers. No, I'm not getting paid for endorsing the book. I don't need to. It's a book. Get it. And it just so happens to be from one of our greatest minds, our sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who passed. May Allah be pleased with our sister. She was one of the coldest psychiatrists. She did not necessarily advocate the drugging, but she did go to the core of what is known as the system of white supremacy. And she looked at how Caucasian white males dominate the world because they themselves are in fear of what is called genetic annihilation. And so they do everything in every area of life to maintain control so that the people don't take over control, because they think that the people are going to do something to attack them, when that's not necessarily the reality. But that is a fear, is what she has said. It's a psychological problem that they have. So she used to debate psychologists, psychiatrists. You should also watch the debate between her and William Shockley. I mentioned this in part 1 of this episode. All over the damn show, just whooping this dude. Whoop, 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 whoop. With real science, real knowledge, going to the core of a person's traumatic issues and looking at that from a cause perspective. So again, I think we should start to look at our mental health and our mental problems and trauma that we may have and really address them. Go to the cause of it. Go to really what's happening. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to look at the effects of things and then look at covering up the effects. Because as soon as you go in for therapy, most of the time, it's drug. But sometimes you have a good therapist who just doesn't do that, and they go to the cause and let's talk about this. And if you go to a nutritionist, they'll, kind of point out the fact that the majority of us in America and the world, but mostly America, are malnourished. Do you know what the psychological effects are on a person who has low levels of vitamin D? Do you know what the psychological effects are on a person who has low levels of iron or overall minerals? If your immune system is compromised and weakened, how does that affect you mentally? If you don't have the right balance of vitamins, minerals, herbs within the body, how is that manipulating and affecting your chemistry, then your thoughts, and then how you operate? Because food can affect your mood. So chemistry can affect how a person behaves, which means, we have to look at the right foods to eat. We have to exercise. You have to get those toxins out of the body. All these different things go into mental health. It all goes into it. So I think we should go more into addressing the causes of these problems. And that way we should be able to see less suicides, less homicides, because a lot of our people are dealing with trauma. It's trauma, it's problems, it's financial issues, it's family issues. There's so much going on, and we're not addressing the causes. We have to look at the causes and therefore not just drug people to death, because that's really where it's leading. So I think that'll be it for this episode. I'm going to just go ahead and end it with a few things. Make sure you go to joinfreethinkers.com to become a member. Join the membership. It supports the work. It supports the research. It supports all of these different things. And many of you ain't getting up and doing, but we are out here doing it for you. Allow us to be your voice. Allow us to gather these things, put it together for you in a way where you can understand it. It helps you to learn. It helps your family to learn, etc. And that, the people who are behind this have your best interest. And we're doing it for the right purposes and the right reasons. So make sure you go to joinfreethinkers.com. Also, go to RizzaIslam.com. This week we have on the black on black with the white outline of natural immunity wins, because they have admitted that over 200 studies prove that natural immunity is stronger than the so-called hybrid immunity or vaccine-induced immunity. We're going to always clap back on y'all since y'all's clapping at us. Natural immunity wins. Make sure you let your shirt say it. You ain't got to say nothing. Just wear the shirt and let it speak for you. Different colors, different assortments. We also have hoodies, and we have other different things on the website. So go to RizzaIslam.com to get that. Also, for those who would like to have your product featured on Intellectual Extremists, we are now opening it up for select products. Black-owned products come to the front of the line. Send an email. Go to RizzaIslam.com and send an email talking about your product, why you feel it fits on the network, and how it helps the people. That is how you will qualify to at least be looked at when it comes to your product. And then we will discuss how we can feature it on our program. And I think that is it. Make sure you support. Here are the different ways you can support. Down here or up here. You can support the show. You can support the movement. But I pray you are all blessed. Be strong. Be intelligent. Intellectual Extremists, we are out. We will see you next time. Peace.